Hey guys, Jason with Decal Factory here with another episode of Raising Your Marketing IQ with Print. Today, we're thrilled to welcome a very special guest, Alex Viegas, a branding expert whose insights we're confident you'll find incredibly valuable. With an impressive 30-year career in branding, Alex has worked with some of the most iconic companies, playing a pivotal role in shaping their branding and marketing strategies. His resume includes not small names like Toyota, Nationwide Insurance, Bell Helicopter, Motel 6, and Home Depot, just to name a few, where he helped guide some of their most critical branding decisions. For the past 7 years, Alex has been freelancing, bringing that same expertise to individual businesses, helping them elevate their brands to new heights, just as he did for those industry giants. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Jason. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
I'm excited.
Yeah, so am I. So I wanted to dive a little bit into you. How did you get started in branding?
Oh gosh, so I've been exposed to graphic design since I was a kid. My brother and my dad are architects, and my sister studied graphic design. So I remember even in elementary school designing logos for my name, just like sketching. So I've always been around it, and that's just what I decided to go to school for. So I have a degree in communication arts from Texas State University, and I was fortunate enough to be able to start to work for big ad agencies directly after graduating. So I have quite a bit of experience doing it at this point. And it's been a fun career for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. What was it like working for Toyota?
It's fun. It's fun because you get to play with big budgets and you get to see your work everywhere. Right?
Oh, sure.
And you also get to see the power of branding and advertising in terms of influencing people's decisions, right? Mm-hmm. So it's awesome.
Yeah, because Toyota doesn't do anything without measuring it, I'm sure.
That's right.
Yeah, so I'm sure that you that you see those metrics all the time.
That's right.
Because they're evaluating you constantly and all that, right?
That's right. And also, early on in my career, I started to work in interactive. So in interactive, as you know, it's all metrics. So you get to see the impact of your campaigns pretty quickly.
What is the most enjoyable marketing / branding experience you had with the companies that you worked with?
I had a lot of really fun experiences and got to really innovate multiple times, going as far as like inventing new technologies, playing around with things like interactive online ads, developing things that had a social media component even before Facebook, things of that nature. But I would say that possibly the campaign that stands out the most was one that I did for Nationwide Insurance many years ago. So when I took over the account as a creative director, there was an ongoing campaign called Life Comes at You Fast. It's primarily TV based, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's typically, bad things happening to people. You better be prepared. Sure. Life comes to you fast. Better be prepared. Get Nationwide Insurance. And although I thought we have many, many years of, proof that comedy is a good way to engage with your audience. I just thought that there had to be a more engaging way to really draw people and make them a part of the brand. So the concept, I'll tell you a couple of concepts because one actually got shot down, but I think it would have been amazing. So what we pitched to the company was actually doing the first ever online reality TV show. Now, this was before the time of we're actually like online TV, right? What we wanted to do is we wanted to recruit two volunteers, a man and a woman, that would basically tell you where they were in life and what their goals were. And then through a microsite, the campaign microsite, the public would get to vote on what actions they had to take on a day-to-day basis. And they actually had to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And there would be a camera crew following them around. And I just was really excited about that possibility because I thought it would have been a very interesting social experiment, right? Like, would people actually try to get them to meet their goals, or would they just screw with their lives, right? Just make them quit their jobs and whatnot. The CMO of Nationwide was a little bit. He loved the idea, but he was a little bit scared about using the online streaming, because at the time it really wasn't happening. So we moved on to the second idea, and this actually went into production. My whole stance was, rather than telling people how life comes at them fast and having it be directional messaging from brand to consumer, I was trying to find ways to actually incorporate the consumer as part of the brand and as part of that story. So I wanted to, again, allow customers to drive the brand messaging, if there was a way to do that, right? And I thought, let's do it in a big way. So to me, like, the epitome of advertising is Times Square. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to allow people to share significant stories about their lives and allow them to display them on some of the giant, digital billboards on Times Square.
Oh, that's cool.
So basically just open up, create the stage for people to express themselves and keep the brand voice quiet. And so Nationwide loved the idea. And then we started to freak out because we didn't know how we were going to actually pull it off, because it had never been done before. This involved actually creating new technology. So it took a lot of convincing, for one, because we reached out to Reuters, that owned some of the biggest billboards in Times Square, and we told them what we wanted to do, and they laughed at us. They're like, "No, you can't have the public control those things. You guys can send us a CD, and we'll play the sequences, but it can't be connected because people are going to be doing crazy stuff with it." So we problem solved that, and we basically built in 3 layers of filtering, including lawyers. So when people submitted stories, it had to make sure that it was, it
had human eyes on it before it hit the billboard.
Yeah, I mean, it had to, be PG rated and so on. But it was actually a massive success. So we worked with a company called Firstborn in New York that were able to develop the interface. So we created a really beautiful, immersive Flash website with sound and movement that invited people to share their stories. And so people could submit a written story as well as multiple pictures, and they would also submit a profile. So again, this goes to the days before Facebook, but there was already an engagement at a social media level. And there was a timeline on the website with little chiclets that whenever your moment would get approved, it would get put on that timeline. And so you would know exactly when your story was going to be displayed on the digital boards.
Massive engagement.
And the other thing that it would do is it would send you a text. So you knew exactly to the second when it was going to go live.
That's
now,
cool.
Anyone that wasn't around Times Square could see it through the website because we had live cams on it. But what we found was that it was phenomenally successful. It actually ended up winning some of the most prestigious advertising awards on an international level and got a lot of media attention, simply because of that engagement. So as an example, I think that one of the biggest wins of that campaign was that people were using it for very, very personal things, specifically for marriage proposals. Because they knew when the moment was going to go live, they would take their fiance to eat somewhere around Times Square and walk out. It's like, "Hey, honey, look over there," right? And there's the big marriage proposal on the giant billboard. And the whole thing is framed with the Nationwide insurance square, right? So I mean, think about that, right? Like how can you take something that we normally perceive as being very stale and boring, like an insurance company, and making it such a personal part of your life? Yeah. So that was a really, really fun thing. It was big budgets involved in that and big risks because of the cost of running those ads in that stage. We weren't able to test it. So everyone at the agency was like biting their nails when the project was going to go live to see if it actually worked, and it worked flawlessly. It was a really big success.
That's amazing.
It was really
That's
fun.
amazing. So that leads me into another question. They don't do that anymore, correct? On the billboard, stuff like that, Nationwide doesn't do that anymore, or do you know?
I don't know. I mean, it's the ongoing nature of advertising that campaigns are constantly evolving. So I haven't kept up with it. Now I have seen other brands that have done similar things. I believe that there was a campaign by Nike that was inspired by our campaign that also invited people to upload personal things onto those billboards. So it kind of started to become a trend after we did that, but I haven't kept up with it, to be honest with you.
Gotcha. So I'm sure that there's a certain time when, hey, you launch a new branding campaign, stuff like that, but then you got to have the expertise and the know-how to know when, hey, it's time to pull this thing, it's time to go on to something else.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm sure that's all part of it.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And being able to know that stuff, is there a formula? Is it just experience? What do you think?
Metrics really, really drive it. Now, typically campaigns are done in 1 to 2 year periods. So that's kind of the bracket, the average bracket of how long a campaign lasts, but metrics will tell you if something is not getting a lot of engagement, then it's time to rethink it. And if it's doing amazing, then why mess with it?
Okay, so you would just keep it going, even though conventional wisdom says, hey, 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
But if it's got the metrics, let it ride.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good.
However, even within the same campaign concept, I think it is important to constantly refresh, right? Because you want to keep that you want to keep the messaging evolving and fresh at all times. You don't want it to be stale.
Yeah, I just read an article. It was an interesting article that it's very off topic, but Hooters is actually on the ropes right now.
Is it?
And they aren't doing well, and they've got there's other players out there that are doing the same concept, and they're doing well. But Hooters has not changed its message in, 30 years? It's the same thing over and over and over again. So they haven't changed with the times.
This is one of the biggest branding mistakes that companies do. Well, I mean, we could go into that in detail, but I think that one of the biggest mistakes is that brands don't evolve, and they need to evolve. Any serious company that's in it for the long haul should plan to do periodic rebrands, or at least like small tweaks and brand evolutions over time, simply because markets change. Perhaps the range of your products or services might expand or might shift stronger into a specific niche. So brands need to get updated. I think that really determines whether a company can be in it for a long time or not. And a lot of people, I mean, there's costs involved with doing this type of thing, and there's a lot of hesitation, really, especially for what I've noticed is smaller businesses. They get really attached to their identity, especially if they've been doing fairly well for a number of years. They don't want to mess with it. Like like it becomes a part of their personal identity. So there's a little bit of education that has to happen when you work with clients like that to make them understand that it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the audience and the market. And if things are evolving, then the brand and the messaging needs to evolve as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, doesn't mean that you have to go back to the drawing board and completely like rename and reinvent everything. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true. You typically want to keep that brand equity and simply like evolve it a little bit, but keep because people are already used to seeing it. So
very cool.
You want to keep that.
Yeah. Well, we've been in business for 42 years. And this is our fourth logo, actually.
Then you understand.
So I do understand about changing with the times. Absolutely.
And naming, renaming a company is one of the hardest things, because at that point, yes, then there has to be a strategy in how you're going to slowly drip that new brand and communicate to your existing customers that you're still the same company. You're just changing your name. But it's absolutely necessary sometimes. A lot of companies go out into the market with a very specific product or service. Over time, the market changes, or they expand that product line, and now they're pigeonholed into whatever that name was. So at that
Sure.
point, it makes sense to revisit the name as
Hmm.
well.
Interesting. That's great. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. Everybody's going to find this very, very valuable.
Thank you.
Why is a strong brand identity crucial for a company's success, especially in a competitive market?
Oh my God. I mean, I think it's crucial even if it's not competitive. Even if you're the first company within a specific niche to come out with a product or service, having a strong brand is everything, because that is what's going to really create memorability, trust, and develop an emotional connection with your audience. So it's everything. I believe that branding and brand strategy should be a part of the initial business plan for people. I think that it's unfortunately it's often an afterthought, and people get into make the mistake of thinking that a brand is a logo, and it's not. They're two very separate things. So a logo, if I may,
Yeah, please.
I like to differentiate both a logo and all of the colors and fonts and things associated with that. I would say that's the corporate identity, right? And using the word corporate goes back to, corpus, it's body. So you can look at it as like that's the physical body of the company. The brand, on the other hand, is the soul. That is the heart of the company. That is what came before the logo existed, and that is what is truly driving the values of the company.
Interesting.
So a lot of companies miss that part, and it's very, very important. Yeah, having all that stuff figured out is what's going to make you stand out from the competition. It's what's going to allow people to remember you. One of the most important pieces is to create trust, right? People need to trust you. And trust is established through a number of different ways, but one of the most important ones is having multiple touch points. We need to see a brand repeated multiple times before we start to trust it. And lastly is an emotional connection. A lot of companies, again, especially smaller companies, local companies that have that like local mom and pop shop type of mentality, really focus a lot on the mechanics of what they're offering, meaning they like to communicate what they do, right, and how they do it, but they miss the emotional piece, which is the why. It is the driving force behind what, why they're doing what they're doing. So this is very, very important to really like connect with an audience, because at the end of the day, we talk about brands, we talk about audiences, but we're just people talking to people, man.
Sure.
So it's just like you have to have that human connection, that handshake, and that's going to happen through authenticity and really understanding who you are and who your audience is to make that connection.
Yeah. I'm absolutely. That's very interesting, knowing so that people know the why they should choose the brand, or why the brand is doing what it's doing.
Correct. And again, this is crucial because a lot of companies go into the market looking at, we all make projections, into the future, financial projections, and we study markets and we focus on the numbers and the math. But a lot of times we don't stop, we don't pause and really identify who we are. And like I said, what is that energy? Why am I doing this to begin with? I mean, I know we all want to make money.
Sure.
But there's usually a deeper reason for that, right? Because you can make money in an infinite number of ways.
Absolutely.
So really identifying the driving values for why you're doing what you're doing is essential to developing a strong brand that's going to last over the years.
Gotcha.
So yes, that piece, and again, that should happen prior to even diving into the design of a logo.
Gotcha. Very cool. I was going to say this to the end, but we're very much talking about the beginning of the brand and stuff like that. So when we talked a few days ago, you had mentioned that building a brand is a process that requires careful time and attention. Can you explain why taking that time is crucial to developing a strong brand?
So I just mentioned one of them, right? It's really pausing to figure out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And in my practice, the ultimate outcome of that research, if you will, is to come up with about 5 to 6 driving values that should be properly translated in all of your different touch points, from your logos to your online marketing to your emails to the way that your staff picks up the phone and greets people. Those values are the filters uh, that determine how you're connecting with people. So that's a very important piece. The other important piece is having a really high level awareness of what your competition is doing. Again, I think that anyone that goes into the market has somewhat of an idea of what their competition is,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of folks don't actually take the time to professionally research that competition in that market. And so what you end up having a lot is that brands will lack differentiation. They get confused for one another oftentimes. And one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen with startups and smaller businesses is that they want to mimic what the big brands are doing. That's a big mistake. So, for instance, if I want to open up a little hardware store, it just makes sense to do what Home Depot is doing because it
Sure.
works. It works for them, right?
Yep.
Not true. Smaller businesses actually have a huge advantage in being small, in that they can really focus on a specific niche and differentiate themselves from the big companies, and that can actually work out really, really well. But they need to have that understanding, and they need to do that market research first. Third piece, understanding your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a lot of us go out into business really having a personal idea of who our customers are, but we don't really take the time to truly identify that demographic and psychographic, and take the time to connect with them and have a human conversation with them, because there's a lot of learning that can happen from that. Even for companies that have been around for a long time, I talked to the business owners in developing the strategy, and they gave me a certain perspective. But I typically request to interview their customers as well, especially repeat customers, because you can get a completely different perspective when you start to ask them, why did you choose to go with them over other people, right? And that piece is very, very crucial. And once you identify that and you understand who you're talking to, and you get as focused as possible, as really niche as possible, because again, a common mistake is that we're all very excited about what we do, and we think, that anybody can use it. That's typically the attitude that drives us to go to open up a business to begin with. Anybody can benefit.
We're very passionate about it.
Yeah.
Sure.
But going into the market thinking that anybody is going to benefit from your product or service is a mistake. You will do better if you zero in on a very small demographic or psychographic, develop a strong relationship with them, get to the point where they consider you what I would call like a soulmate brand, right? Develop that trust, have them incorporate your brand into their everyday life. Once you have that, then you can start to expand into other demographics and other markets. But it always makes sense to really get laser focused on where you're starting.
Gotcha.
Once you have all that, at that point you can move into the design and all of the tangibles that come from branding.
I see. Okay, gotcha. So not casting a wide net, being very targeted in your approach at first.
And this is especially true for a startup and a small business that doesn't have millions of dollars to dump into advertising.
Sure,
right?
Absolutely. And I imagine that's another one, comes with experience, when you know to go to the next level.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, very good. As you know, we do decals and badges and OEM badges and all that. And so what can high quality decals and badging, how can they contribute to the branding and reinforcing of a company's brand image?
It's funny because I think that most people, if you were to say, decals, they would think that it's just a very small thing. I don't think it's small at all. I think that it's a tremendous tool for promoting your brand for multiple reasons. One is to truly have an audience trust your brand. It is important for them to be exposed to your brand in multiple touch points. Okay, that means that if you're putting all your focus on online ads, but people are not seeing your brand in printed materials or in physical spaces, you're going to be missing out.
A couple of years ago, we used to call that the marketing circle. It's like you see it in the billboard, you see it on the back of the car, you see it in the store, you see it on the floor graphic in the store.
You got
Same
it.
kind of thing.
It's the exact same kind of thing. That is, it is crucial for people to really develop that brand recognition, and ultimately, this is happening at a subconscious level, the brand trust. So there's a marketing rule that says that pretty much that your audience needs to be exposed to your brand and brand messaging at least 7 times before they really recognize you. And that's going to be a lot more effective when you have multiple touch points. So again, a sticker may just seem like a small afterthought, but it's not. And if you can get people to put the stickers on their car or their laptop or their water bottle or whatever, you're creating a lot of impressions at a very low cost, right? So that's one reason. I think that the other reason is being able to carry that brand messaging in a consistent way. And those small touches, if it's done well, will go a long way. So a branding mistake that some companies make is that they're inconsistent with their messaging, and they're also inconsistent with their quality. Right? So they may have put all their focus and all their money towards product development, let's say. And when it comes to actually like branding that product or putting a decal on it, they're going to go with the cheapest option, perhaps just a regular vinyl flat sticker. Nothing wrong with that. But I think that when you really elevate and pay attention to all those little details, it can create a much stronger emotional connection and carry the message of high quality, right? If you want people to believe that your product is high quality, I think that doing something like like an eco dome or something that has a little bit more texture, or perhaps that has a contrast between matte and metallic inks and things of that nature is gonna go a long way. And to go even deeper than that, it's also incorporating more of your senses. And this is very important for brand recognition. So anytime that you wake up an emotional response in the viewer, you're going to have a much higher likelihood of people actually remembering you. Again, that's a big miss for small mom and pop businesses, because they focus on the tactics of what they're doing, and they fail to really understand the emotionality that needs to happen. Ultimately, we all make purchasing decisions based on emotions, not facts. So you have a decal on a product. If you can actually touch it and feel that level of quality, it's awakening your senses. And it's awakening a different part of your brain. So the way that brand or that memory gets registered in your brain, if you can, you essentially anytime that you create an emotion in the body, whether it's good or bad, it triggers the amygdala, and the amygdala tells the hippocampus in the brain how that memory is going to be distributed, how it's going to be recorded in the brain. This is why most of us, remember significant things in our lives, right? Our marriages and our graduation and things of that nature, because there was a lot of emotionality into it. Yeah. When it comes to remembering facts that don't have an emotion attached to it, it's not as likely to happen.
Absolutely.
So yeah, a decal, it's a very inexpensive and very powerful way to create that.
Yeah, interesting. Very, very cool. All right. That's very interesting. As you say, the more senses you can activate in a potential customer, let's say, the more they're going to remember your brand.
100%.
That's amazing. I never knew that.
Yeah,
that is amazing. All right. We already talked about some the brands that the mistake they make of not changing and not evolving with the times. What are some other mistakes that you've seen businesses make, or they make them, and how can they avoid them?
Okay, that's a really good question. And yes, you're right. I think that the lack of evolving the brand over time is a really big one. I would say the main one is what I also mentioned a minute ago in terms of not truly focusing on what branding is and going through a proper brand development. So companies come out into the market thinking that all they need in order to operate is to put a logo on the corner of their website. So they'll end up going on Fiverr or any of these like online, design places and pay somebody to design. They may already even have an idea for what they want. I want my logo to be a tree or whatever. And so what ends up happening is that these designers are not formally trained for the most part, and they don't understand strategy. So what they do is they just use clip art, right?
Mm.
And they're giving you what you're asking for. You want a tree? Yeah, here's a cute little tree. That may not be the right approach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because again, they're missing that's the strategy part and really understanding. So perhaps that initial concept could have been explored by a professional and you could have come up with something that you weren't originally thinking of, but that's going to resonate with your audience in a lot deeper way.
Gotcha.
And there's also things like, for instance, a lot of people use clip art or very, fancy illustrations that may have a lot of layering, that may have gradients, transparencies, things that may look cool on the screen, but actually become a nightmare for reproduction.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they're just impossible. Like
I've dealt with it.
If you want to embroider something, with gradients and like holograms, it's just not going to work. So companies are better served to actually hire professionals and that understand the importance of reproduction, of scalability. You always want a logo to be able to be blown up and put on the side of an airplane or shrunken down and put on a pen and still retain its quality. Another mistake, brand inconsistency. Right? This is true for a lot of smaller companies. They're changing up their messaging, their colors, their fonts all the time. Or they may have hired a branding studio to create their big brand, but when it comes to the month-to-month promotions in their store,
Yep.
It looks like promotions done from, like a bar, like your local bar or whatever,
Sure.
and they're just everything's done in Canva and kind of like low cost.
Right.
That breaks that brand consistency.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very important piece.
That's why larger companies have like brand guidelines. They say you can only use these colors. You can only use these fonts. You can only use it in this combination.
100%.
Like that.
Brand guidelines are a must for any company, regardless of any size.
Mm-hmm.
But also really paying attention to those smaller touch points, right? If you think about this, is especially true for franchises. If you think of, you mentioned Hooters a minute ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like their competitor, what's it called? Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks. Yep.
Any restaurant like that. Even the little ads that you see in the bathroom wall, they have a corporate look. They're very professional and fleshed out because they want to carry that brand consistency. So that's pretty important, and that applies to decals as well, right? If you're just creating some decals that are low resolution or low quality, it's going to really damage the overall brand perception.
Absolutely. Quality is key.
Yep.
Key.
Yep.
There's been a lot of things that have come up recently with a lot of digital printers that have come on the market that we've seen, and when we look at them, we know, man, that's not a very good looking decal. It gets the job done. It still says the message, but it just doesn't do it very well.
There is so much about communicating brands that happens at a subconscious level. Okay, so we talked about emotions a minute ago, but there are so many things that go into it that where the consumer is not conscious of it, but you are subconsciously perceiving a certain level of quality, certain level of attention to detail that is very important in developing that brand trust. Just as an example, for instance, when I develop my brands, I always run them through sacred geometry principles. I don't know if you guys understand what that is.
I've never heard of that before.
Okay, so sacred geometry, there's a certain there's certain mathematical ratios that are inherent in nature. Okay, from the fractals that are created on a flower or a fruit, when you see those patterns in the seeds and the petals, to the proportions that we actually, it's built into our body. The proportions in our ear, the proportions between our upper body and our forearm and our fingers and knuckles, those are all mathematical ratios that are very predictable. And
like the golden ratio? I've heard that.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
The golden ratio is like the Mac Daddy of sacred geometry, because it's found so much in nature. Like I said, even in our anatomy. So I always stop to, when I'm designing things, I'm not just designing them freehand. When at all possible, I'm running them through sacred geometry principles. Like, to use the golden ratio as an example, what I'll do often is I'll create the golden rectangle in all their subdivisions, and then I'll put little circles inside those subdivisions. And those circles become the template for all of the curves on the logo, right? So there's no curve that is random. It's all aesthetically pleasing and proportionate to the rest of the logo. Same thing when it comes to the relationship between the mark and the type, whether it's vertical, whether it's horizontal. I think that running them through those ratios makes it aesthetically pleasing. And I can get really geeky with that. If you see like the schematics that go into the brand creation, it's like it's like crazy. It looks like blueprints of designing a vehicle or something, and all that is invisible to the consumer. At the end of the day, the logo may just be like a butterfly or whatever the case may be, but subconsciously you're perceiving that. Your brain can perceive that attention to detail and associate that with quality.
Oh, interesting. If somebody has not gone through that process, what are they missing? What are they losing out on? That's because I mean, people will do it and they'll be like, "Hey, it's good enough." And for some brands, I mean, yeah, that's how they operate. What are they missing though by not going through those steps? Talking to an expert like yourself, trying to get understanding that they need that expertise in their business. What are they missing out on?
Well, I think the main missing point there is what we keep going back to: creating an emotional reaction in the consumer and creating trust. And more than anything, I think that without really going through those lengths, you're going to have a hard time scaling. So getting away with, a Fiverr type of design may work at a local level, but if you want to expand to other cities, or if you want to go national or international, that's not going to cut it. At that point, you have to really put in place a very solid brand strategy, very solid corporate identity, and you have to do your research to make sure that has longevity, right? Because you always want to, timelessness is something that needs to be considered when it comes to brand development. It's easy to, I mean, every year, right? And I get these reports, you start to see certain design trends and new things come out. And these trends are often driven by some of the bigger brands like Apple, right? Apple has created a lot of trends when it comes to the different interface designs. Like, I don't know, as an example, there was a time that we saw this like very gel 3-dimensional look on buttons on websites and things, right? That kind of started to permeate everything else. So those trends are like, they're just trends and they're going to eventually die out. And so it's important when it comes to the actual core brand that it's timeless and that it's going to survive 10 or 20 years. Now, again, invariably, we have to go through certain, brand metamorphosis and tweak it, but ultimately just going down to the essentials. That's very important.
Very interesting. I can't thank you enough for being here, Alex. This is some really good information.
Thank you.
I had another question. How significant is the number of impressions a printed logo receives in building and maintaining a brand?
It's extremely important. Extremely important. So again, this goes back to there's psychology behind it and there's also neurology behind it, right? In the sense that the way that the brain works when it comes to, number one, developing trust for somebody or something, and two, the way that it works in terms of remembering something. Mm-hmm. So it's just a numbers game. And this is why most big companies invest in creating as many touch points as possible. And this is where all the little knickknacks and promotional materials and, bumper stickers and things like that come in. The more your eye sees the same logo, you start to trust it, even if you don't know much about that company. And then when it comes to purchasing decisions, you're going to tend to trust the brand that you recognize more than one that you don't, even if the one that you don't is genuinely better. It's just psychology. Yep.
Okay. I have another question about that. Okay. How little companies break into that when the big companies are everywhere? And I think you already touched on that, is that you focus on a niche. Yeah, that's right. You already talked about that.
And also you focus on things that don't cost a lot. I mean, you guys are the perfect example.
Yeah.
Right? Think about how much you'd have to pay to get the same number of impressions on an ad where you're paying every time that someone clicks on it, as opposed to something like that somebody might put on a car, and then people driving by are constantly being exposed to it for free.
I've talked about this for so long.
It's like an initial investment, and then it's like having, thousands of little brand ambassadors going out there and spreading the message.
Oh, I talk about it all the time. Decals, printed decals, beat Google every day of the week in terms of affordability.
Yep.
100% beat them.
Yep.
are like 10, 15 times cheaper than Google.
Yep.
And it just works better. So that's really good. Yeah, and as far as impressions go, I imagine the higher quality a decal that you have, the more impressions you're going to get. You talked about that a little bit, about having a high quality decal. Some of the stuff that we're trying to do is make the decals look OEM, right? So like original equipment manufacturing, right? Where you get a product and it looks like the decal's part of that product. The more and more you can make it look like that, I'm assuming the higher the impression is going to be.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt. You don't want it to look like an afterthought.
Sure.
You don't want it to, I mean, from a psychological perspective, I think it would be important for the person to perceive the logo or whatever the decal is to be as much as part of the product, right? So you're not conscious that they just slapped a sticker on it.
Right.
That way it's associated with the product itself. Mm-hmm. And as long as you have a good quality product, then that's going to be recognized, remembered as a good quality brand that develops trust and advocacy. And ideally, over time, you will have people incorporate that brand into their lives, even when they're not using your product and service. And that's the key to really obviously not all companies can get to that point. I don't foresee ever, for instance, like CPS and telephone companies to be a soulmate brand, but a lot of brands do have that opportunity. And I think that the marker of a soulmate brand is exactly what I said. When people start to wear the t-shirt or the hat or put the bumper sticker on their cars, even when they're not using your product.
Sure.
At that point, people have welcomed you into their everyday lives, and they become brand ambassadors.
We understand, we at the Decal Factory understand about impressions and the high qualityness of the decals. You need to have the high quality decals in order to get the proper impressions. I'll tell people all the time, hey, the goal is to get your customers to use your decals often and everywhere. And the only way you're going to do that is A, with a high quality decal, and B, honestly, with a very good design. And like you were saying, a well-designed logo. Those two things being comboed together, your impression rate goes way up.
100%.
Yeah. And so one of our customers makes a product and has a flat decal that goes on it. And it works. This is not the exact decal that they use, but it's an example of. It works. It conveys what it is, what it does, all that stuff, and who it is. It works, but it's not, it's just a decal. And then we convinced him to go with that, with the metal, the beautiful edges on it, the unbelievably tight registration, and it looks like it's part of the product.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's like a huge difference. Huge difference. And this looks like it over time it would probably peel off as well. As where this is just like you said, it's part of the product, and it also incorporates two sensory stimulations. You've got the glossy, shiny, metallic look, right? That's like really catching your attention, and it's got the tactile quality. This screams quality.
Yeah.
And it screams permanence. And for something like a lock,
right?
That's what you want.
That's what you want. That's exactly right.
And this product actually incorporates even another sense, which is sound.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So the more you can engage the senses, the more people are going to trust it.
So last question. Can you share examples of companies that effectively use branding, including decals, to enhance their visibility and customer loyalty?
Oh my God. Okay. So I think it's hard to talk about branding without talking about Apple. I mean,
the 900-pound gorilla.
Year after year after year, Apple comes out number one. Number one loved brand in the world. And the main reason they've accomplished that is because they have gotten really good at focusing on the values that drive their products, not on the products themselves, right? So their stance, going back decades at this point, what all of their advertising is, and you guys might remember the famous campaign, Think Different, right?
Yep.
So really to challenge the status quo and coming up with products that are not expected, that are not your average. And by focusing on that value-driven messaging, they've well outperformed IBM. And you could even make the comparison or the argument that IBM produces products just as good as Apple, if not even better, right?
Sure.
But that doesn't matter because people are not buying those products based on the stats and the technicality of it. As I've said before, they want to focus on the emotionality, the emotional impact. So from the design of their products to the design of their packaging, to their advertising, to their website, everything is so slick. The attention to detail is so spot on, and they've created this very beautiful, minimalistic, original, and year after year, their creative campaigns just blow everything else out of the water because they continue to innovate and come out with design styles that no one has seen before, right? So their focus on brand has by far outperformed whatever their actual products are doing. And talk about emotionality. Again, going back to the very simple things, like even just the texture that they use on their laptops and on their desktop computers, that like powdery, soft aluminum texture,
soft
right?
touch.
Yeah, everything
velvet.
is just velvet, exactly. And the website, the same thing. It's so minimal and so like you can almost feel it. It has a tactile quality.
Yeah.
So they have blown everybody else out of the water because they truly understand branding. And as it ties into decals, I don't know if you guys remember, but their products come with a little sticker, right? Yep. They actually were some of the first ones that started to do that. I think that practice has become more commonplace these days. But so without even having the name of the company on it, just by having the little emblem, now people become brand ambassadors and put that sticker on their car and their products and whatever, So they've done a phenomenal job at that. Another company that's hard not to talk about when we talk about branding is Nike. Nike has it's just the epitome of getting your brand recognition to such a place that you don't even need to see the name. All you need to see is that little check mark. I was actually the swoosh. Yeah, when I was in college, I had the opportunity to talk to the copywriter that came up with the line, "Just do it."
Really?
Yeah. Cool dude. And it's been such a huge success. And obviously it's been a gradual thing. They didn't just go out into the market with a swoosh, right? It's like they created enough brand recognition to then over time strip it away to get to the most essential piece, which is that swoosh that now everybody recognizes.
Right. We were talking the other day about how, as brands evolve, they get simpler and simpler. Simpler and simpler.
That's right.
And so Nike is the epitome of that.
Is the epitome of that.
Wow, that's interesting. So but that's a real world example, right there.
I could give you so many different examples, right? But overall, and going back to the mistakes that companies make when they come out into the market, I think that a lot of people get really excited and they want to embellish their logos with a bunch of layers and colors and gradients and sparkles and things. And that doesn't tend to last. I think that what truly lasts is minimal design, very simple, very clean stuff that is not trendy, that's going to stand the test of time.
Yeah.
Right? So that stuff really, really works. Let's see, another company that comes to mind, and again, the Nike is a good example, even for the decals as well, right? Because that's a brand that people will incorporate into their everyday lives, and you see those stickers on vehicles and on everything.
Yep.
Another brand that stands out to me, just off the top of my head, is Red Bull. Red Bull has created and Red Bull is also an incredible example for how a small company can actually topple the big corporations if they understand branding and they understand their target audience. Because when Red Bull came out into the market, they were competing against Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
Yeah.
Just a little small company, but they were actually they weren't the very first one. There were one or two products that came before them in terms of like the energy drinks, but they knew how to position themselves into that niche that then really started to compete with the big corporations. They were phenomenal at that. And overall, going back to the emotionality of it, Red Bull has a very defiant, very loud, very like testosterone and adrenaline driven brand, right?
Very guerrilla marketing.
100%.
Kind of deal,
yeah. Very loud, in your face, and it's represented with the big colorful graphics that now we've become associated with all the extreme races and all that kind of stuff has that branding.
They're
right?
Amazing.
They've done even some stunts out in space and so that extreme attitude, for lack of a better word, has become a really big part of their branding. And again, people are so passionate about it that you see the branding in cars and all kinds of different places.
That's amazing. Red Bull's a great example. I love that you brought that up. They are so amazing in what they do. I tell you what, it just, and it's so funny because all the stuff they do, which totally builds their brand, has nothing to do with energy drinks.
That's right.
It's so amazing. Anyways, that's a little segue. Anyways, continue.
I don't know. I guess there's other companies, more like outdoor gear companies, especially Patagonia and perhaps also the North Face, that also fall into that category, where people are just so passionate about those products that they put their they put the stickers on everything,
Sure.
all their water bottles and their gear and their cars. You see people that are into the outdoors. You always see like the Jeeps and the 4x4s completely plastered with the outdoor brands.
Absolutely.
That's good branding, y'all. Like
Mhm.
that's a true passionate like incorporation of a brand into their
Absolutely.
everyday life.
Absolutely. I seem to find enthusiast sports are the ones that have the most decals being used for it, right?
Like motocross and stuff like that.
exactly. Hunting, archery, stuff like that. Just the enthusiast sports. People have use or love putting the decals on their stuff.
And why do you think that is, right? There's an emotion, there's an energy behind that. Again, very like whether the market is male, if it's like very testosterone and adrenaline driven or whatever the case may be, it's a very there's an energy behind the symbol that is being communicated.
We've been talking a lot about the brand, and you keep coming back to emotion, emotion, emotion. Branding is just sparking that emotion. Is that correct?
100%. I mean, ultimately, branding is human communication, right? I was living in Dallas at the time, working for one of the biggest ad agencies in this part of the world. And I moved to Atlanta to work with a company called 22 Squared because I fell in love with the model that they had. So basically, they had something that's called the friendship model. And they looked at psychological studies that pointed to the fact that we all, on average, have about 484 friends in a lifetime. And those friendships fall into different categories. And they go all the way from like a forced relationship on one end of the spectrum to a soulmate relationship on the other end of the spectrum. And what they realized is that there's a direct relationship between human relationships and the relationships that we have with brands. And so they had a way to run some metrics to find out where a brand falls within that spectrum and try to come up with ways to move it closer and closer to that soulmate brand. So I really resonated with that philosophy because, again, we're humans talking to humans. And I think we need to keep that in mind every time that we're trying to do advertising. A lot of people can get really siloed into the cost of, online ads and, pay-per-click and, social media impressions, and they get too focused on the algorithm, on hacking the algorithm, and on the technicalities of their ad campaigns, and they forget what they're actually doing, which is they're trying to connect with somebody. They're trying to like shake their hand and introduce them and develop a genuine, authentic relationship. That's what it's all about.
Very cool. Very awesome. All right, very good. Well, hey, Alex, thank you for coming by. So, where can people find you at if they have more questions or they want to inquire about your services? Where can they find you at?
I think the best place is simply my website. I'm not big into social media. I've carved out a niche where I'm very fortunate enough to get all my business through word of mouth.
Awesome.
But the website, it is Noetic Front. That's NOETIC Front FRONT.com.
Perfect. And they can get all your information there, how to get a hold of you, all that.
It has my portfolio. It's got my background, and that way they can see some of my the ad campaigns that I did for the global brands we spoke about, and my contact info. And I would love to connect with people that resonate with.
Very good. And we will put all that information and everything that about Alex down in the description of this video, so you can get a hold of him that way also. If you got value out of this, please click like, share this video, distribute this video. We're dependent on you. Alex, again, thank you again.
Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
All righty.